Here's the question everybody wants to ask after an interview. Is it over? Did I get the job? How was I? Why don't you love me? But you can't ask those questions. Much like when your mother told you to stop pointing at that man and asking him why his face looked so weird when you saw somebody who didn't look like you or mum or dad. So here's 9 great questions that you can ask after an interview, and they all basically come from this book, which you can buy in the... No, I'm joking. So this is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by a guy called Dale Carnegie. It's written in, I believe, the 1930s. And Warren Buffett is his biggest fan. He said Dale Carnegie changed his life. So he did a public speaking course that Dale Carnegie taught. And he was probably one of the, sort of an original self-help personal development guy, but actually it's really actionable. When you first come across this thing, and this is a big problem for people, they're like, oh my God. So when an interviewer goes, have you got any questions for me? You're like, when will I start? How much will I get paid? When will I get the result of the interview? And probably the most cringeworthy thing that you can go through as an interviewer, when somebody is still there and they go, how did I do in the interview? Dude, I can't tell you that you were awful and I can't wait for you to leave. I'm just kidding. You were great. We'll call you. So the point is that how can you ask questions, and what is the general theme, the general idea which comes from this book? Because I watched a lot of different videos about here's the 7 best questions that you can ask, and I thought most of the videos were not very good. Now, the basic psychology behind it is that people love to talk about themselves. The sweetest word in any language, and this expressly comes from Dale Carnegie, the sweetest word in any language is that person's name. So at the end of an interview, and all of these questions are kind of inspired by this, is what do you think? Tell me more about yourself. Tell me about how awesome and amazing you are. For example, how did you end up working here? What are you working on right now? What's the best piece of advice anyone has given you? That's also a really good icebreaker. I used to use that as an icebreaker when I was just out and about. It was a great way to speak to strangers and just say, excuse me, if you don't mind me asking, what's the best piece of advice anyone's ever given you? I have never had a negative response. I've had people being like, go away, you weirdo, get away from me. But I've not had anybody kind of like throw stuff at me, because it's a pattern interrupt. Good questions make you think. That is something that's really important when you're posing them to people. What's the best piece of advice for someone just starting to work here? And this is kind of along the lines of, okay, so if I got this job, what can I start to do now that's gonna help me to be good when I start? And that's quite proactive, that's quite forward thinking, and that's incredibly rare. What's the most interesting project or client that you've worked on? What's a common mistake you see new starters do here? Dude, everybody should ask this question. If you're starting at a new job, just ask your manager, ask people in the team, ask them to say, like, what's a common mistake that you see people make? Like, well, everyone tries to schmooze at lunch, but really everybody knows that all the best schmoozing happens for after dinner drinks. So don't bother to do the lunch thing, do the after dinner drinks thing. And it's so surprising, the massive mistake, particularly young people make by watching TikTok and YouTube, when basically the best sources of information are sitting in the office with you. What's something I can learn that would really help me on the job? I love to hear if there's anything I could do better for my next interview. That's borderline. I've got to admit, that's a little bit borderline. It's kind of asking, how did I do, but in a roundabout way. And have you got any articles or books you read recently that you think would be interesting? And I think all of these, if I was to kind of think what my top 3 are, it's what's the best piece of advice? What's one thing that I can do right now that's going to help me when I start here? And what's a common mistake you see new starters make? A bonus question I'd add is, how is technology affecting your industry? What's a recent piece of news that's sort of flown under the radar from everybody else, but you think is super important for your company and your industry right now? Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this video, something a little bit different from you. If you have, please like and subscribe to the channel. Drop me a comment down below for other videos you'd like me to make. Peace.